comments. And the first one is Chris Van Houten.
Yes, I was going to talk about the Huron Lake and the
Use the mic, please. Yeah, come up and use the mic. And you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, I'd like to talk about the irrigation law that was just shot down, and although this has failed, I hope that, and I know some people didn't support it, I hope that you'd be willing to at least support the principle that the waters need to be protected. Last year on Huron Lake, the water level went down 2 feet in spite of the rain we had, which was not a great deal, but at least it was a decent amount. By law, all users are entitled to their share of the water, and the lakes aren't getting theirs. It's not just ours. There's Plainfield Lake, Long Lake, Huron Lake, Hancock Lake, Pine Lake, and several others, which are substantially down. We had the USGS out here recently at our lake shooting in some elevations. We're down about 8 feet from the ordinary high water mark and about 10 feet from the all-time high. They've installed one of their gauges which are monitoring it, and hopefully we'll have some better information than I've been able to gather myself over the years. Science has shown that irrigation is a major contributor to the decline in the water levels. In 2006, according to the DNR records, there were 38 pivot wells in the immediate vicinity of our lake. Since that time, I know several more that have been put in. If we lose 2 feet of water a year over the next several years, we'll have a hole in the ground too. There's been irrigation around here as long as I've been here, which is since about 1983. We haven't had a problem until about 2002. At that point, the water stopped fluctuating up and down and it's just going straight down. I've got a few pictures I'd like to pass around. I'd like to get these back. These are from Hancock Lake, sent to me by the President of their association. And I've got some of some before and after pictures of Huron Lake. I apologize for the family photo appearance of the before pictures, but in those days, the one thing we need to keep in pictures of records so they show some of our family members. But you can see from this, if you look at that one on top there, that's pointed out the corner of our patio. And you can see that the water is right up to there. In fact, the water was higher than that. I used to put my pier right on top of the patio. Now I've got 80 feet of beach between me and my daughter. So in summary, once again, we are hoping to get a new groundwater bill with more universal support. I hope you will look favorably upon the concept of protecting the groundwaters.
Okay, thank you. Our next presenter is Lee Flight.
Hi. My comment is about the zone change on Pleasant Lake. Pleasant Lake belongs to everybody in the township, not just the people that live on Pleasant Lake. The zone change is in compliance with the approved land use plan in the county and the outdoor recreational plan. There's a need for more public access on Pleasant Lake and in the western part of the county, and a swimming area there too. The swimming area will be buoyed off 70 feet into the water. At that 70 feet, the water is 6 foot deep. And the county is short of parks. We are short in that part of the county. So we would like to build a park on Pleasant Lake. The other thing that we passed a referendum a year ago, 95-31, to establish a park on Pleasant Lake. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. That is it for public comments that are registered. Now we have an amended agenda, what was on your desk, and on that amended agenda, Economic Development and Recovery Zone, Bill Wheeler cannot make it tonight, so that will not be on. And the discussion of possibly action items, revisit, make up a standing committee, that'll be brought back at a later date. Mr. Downey requested it, and he's gonna bring it back at a later date. With that, 2 changes on the amended agenda that we have here, we need a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to approve the amended agenda with the changes noted.
Do we have a second? Yeah, second by Everett, okay. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that's been approved. Approval of our minutes of our April 20th, 2010 organizational meeting. Motion, motion to approve by Mr. Likeness, seconded by Donna Collada. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, they've been approved. There's no old business for tonight, and now new business. We have a presentation from Groundwater Issues in Waushara County. Mike Gear, White River Flowage Lake Management District, George Kraft, UW Stevens Point, Doctor of Hydrology, PowerPoint presentation, groundwater pumping effects on groundwater levels, lake levels, and stream flows in the central Wisconsin sands. And gentlemen, go ahead and use the microphone if you can.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Geyer. Besides being chairman of the White River Flowage Lake Management District, I'm also president of the Waushara County Watershed Lakes Council. I became president about 3 years ago. Since then, we've been very concerned in the Watershed Council about a condition that's very evident to all of us, and that is that the lakes in the western part of Waushara County are disappearing at an alarming rate. Upon looking into the matter, in 2008, I drafted a letter to the Groundwater Advisory Committee in Madison that they should research or help us research what's taking place in the Central Sands area of Wisconsin. The Central Sands area is made up of 5 counties, that being Adams County, Wood County, Waushara County, Wapaka, and Portage counties. We wanted that area designated as outstanding resource waters and to be placed on a groundwater management designation at that time. That was in 2008. In 2008, when that letter was drafted, Long Lake in Waushara County, a 45-acre lake east of Plainfield, was down 14 feet. Huron Lake, a 48-acre lake southeast of Plainfield, was down 14 feet. Plainfield Lake, a 31-acre lake east of Plainfield, had dried up in 2005. An unnamed lake, 30-acre lake across Highway 73 from Plainfield Lake to the east, also dried up in 2005. Sand Lake, not too many people know about Sand Lake, but I do. Sand Lake's a 143-acre lake south of Plainfield. That's down 6 feet. Pine Lake, a 168-acre lake in Hancock, is down 12 feet. And Fish Lake, a 177-acre lake east of Hancock, is down 10 feet. That was in 2008. Also in 2008, 2 bodies of water in southern Portage County by the Two Lakes restaurant had dried up in 1998. There was already a scheme starting to take place that the western part of Waushara County was drying up, and that is where the aquifer is in Waushara County. Most of these bodies of water are surface water lakes. In 2009, October 23rd to be exact, the Groundwater Works Group from Madison met with area officials, myself, on what used to be the shores of Long Lake. In 2009, Long Lake has now disappeared. It is a field of weeds and dreams. Property values are down 60%. Huron Lake is down 18 feet and will dry up in 2 or 3 years. It will be gone. Pine Lake and Fish Lake in 2009 are now down 12 to 14 feet. These are facts of what is taking place in Waushara County and also in the Central Sands area. Revenue is down. I heard this morning on Channel 11 that there are 11 counties in the state of Wisconsin where revenue was down in 2009. Waushara County was one of them, to the tune of 9%. It was not top on the list, but I don't like to see Waushara County in that classification, period. We need every bit of revenue we can get. The waters of Waushara County generate about 65 to 70% of the revenue for Waushara County. Without the waters here, we will not have any revenue. This presentation that I'm giving tonight, I gave to the legislators in Madison on March 31st. I was also down in Madison to testify March 24th about this same situation. Basically, is the groundwater bill that was not passed by April 22nd and it's actually dead at this point. There are revisions that have been made, and we plan on having that bill before the legislators and the senators again in 2010 for passage. We need groundwater management designation for this area, or we are going to lose all of our lakes in the western part of Waushara County, and it will gradually move to the east. If you go by Silver Lake today, you'll see it's down 6 to 8 feet. It's a seepage lake. Irrigami is not a seepage lake. However, the water from Irrigami flows into Silver. The situation is getting to a point where if we don't act now, we're going to lose additional revenue, but more importantly, we're going to lose a resource that Waushara County is known for, and that is its water. So we need the support of the county board, and I know that there's a problem with this bill in reference to funding, and I know how you feel about unmandated funding or unmandated things coming down from Madison. I agree with you 100%, but what they are asking for, we can put together ourselves. The information is out there, and I don't see anybody looking to collect money to forward that information to, one, the county board of Waushara County, and two, to the legislators and the senators of the state of Wisconsin. We need to act today, and we need to act now. One of the things I did mention to the legislators was that our belief is that high-capacity wells in the area are a major cause for the water disappearing in this county. The Waushara County Watershed Lakes Council does not want to shut down these high-capacity wells. We want to work with corporate farming, the family farmer, the business farming, and the business that make money off of this region. But we want them to understand also that the water that they are using to irrigate their fields, to the tune now of about 3,000 irrigation systems, needs to be regulated. Without regulation, we are still going to lose water. It's that simple. The idea behind this whole process is kind of twofold, you might say. I know that the state of Wisconsin, through the DNR issuing permits to authorize new construction of high-capacity wells, makes an average of $600,000 a year. I recommended to the legislators that part of this money should go directly to the family farms, the low-income farm people who have existing irrigation systems on their property that are usually dated, very dated, and not economical. I recommended that part of this $600,000 be offered to family farms as low-interest loans for them to upgrade their systems to a more efficient operation, which will help the environment. Two, to help the people who have lost their lakes or are about to lose their lakes in the form of property tax relief. The money that has been collected by the state up until this year has been redirected on other projects, So the $600,000 is not even used for what it was meant to be used for. It's being redirected in Madison. That we need changed. I made that clear to the legislators when I testified before them on March 31st. That's where we stand. That is factual. That is what is taking place in Waushara County. It is not that we are against the irrigation systems or the family farm or the corporate farm or the business, for example, Del Monte. We are not against these people. We want to talk to them. We want to sit down at a table and meet with them and see if we can work out a resolution that will save our lakes and give our lakes a chance to recharge themselves. When I talked to the older people of the western part of the state or the western part of the county, they told me that, yeah, that lake dried up back in the 50s and it came back. I said, when did it come back? They said a year or two. Well, it's been since '98 when the two lakes by Two Lakes Resort disappeared. They have not come back. The Plainfield Lake and the body of water across Highway 73, they've been gone since 2005. The DNR knows about it. There was an article in the Argus paper about it. They haven't come back. Long Lake, I'm sorry to say, probably will not come back either. We need to have a working relationship to get and protect our environment, and that is the bodies of water of Waushara County. Now, to give you some additional information, I'd like to introduce to you a very close friend of mine and a very professional individual, Professor George Kraft from UW Stevens Point.
Good evening. I'll mostly be looking at this thing, so don't feel you have to continue looking at me. Well, I know I'm not that much to look at anyways. A couple of things here. First, I'm a hydrologist and a water policy management guy at UW Stevens Point and UW Extension, and so I'm directly connected with Patrick here. My role here is to give you information. It's not to advocate for a cause of action here at all. Except this, I guess. I come from a College of Natural Resources at UW Stevens Point, and we're all for management of natural resources, and we see that bad things happen when we don't manage them. We had the cutover in northern Wisconsin in the 1890s, 1900s. We lost forest productivity, soil productivity there. We had Dust Bowl days because we didn't manage our soils correctly. We didn't manage our water pollution correctly, and well, we ended up problems with our lakes and streams. So I guess the only thing that I'm an advocate for is that we know what we want and that we have appropriate policies and management in place to get there. So I'm going to give you the short version of something that normally takes an hour. I'd be very happy to meet with anybody that would like to go for the longer version sometime. So we're here because there's stress water bodies out there in this county and in Portage County primarily. Some of them are dried up. Some of them that aren't dried up are way low and have winter killed and that sort of thing. And we're in the middle of a long discussion about how we should manage water resources in Wisconsin and this part of the state in particular. And some of this goes back 70 years. This quote here in 1949 was made because at that time people were irrigating directly out of streams and drying them up. And this fellow here, Burge from the Wisconsin College of Agriculture, was advocating for the correct management so that it would allow people to take some water from streams, but a certain amount and not pump them dry. As people were getting kicked out of streams because there was too many pumpers in there, they turned to groundwater. There was also improvements in technology for getting irrigation water onto the landscape at that time and in well drilling. And so people more and more went to groundwater as a source of water to irrigate fields here. And there was a lot of debate about this, and you can see two quotes from the time here. The upper one from the Isaac Walton League saying, people, but you proceed cautiously here, be careful what we do. The lower one, which actually was the first attempt at trying to draft a groundwater management bill, which failed, was from people, as farmers and bankers and processors and the like. So, don't worry about this. We have with vast resources, there's no effect on these water levels. Don't be concerned about this. And perhaps part of it is they never saw that they'd be as successful as we are today, having some 200,000 acres of irrigated land in central Wisconsin. And so really, you know, we haven't proceeded very far from the quote in 1949 that, you know, we need something on the books to manage how much water we can pump out of the ground or out of lakes and streams. So, you know, we've gone from just a handful of high-capacity wells in 1960 to about 3,000 in the year 2000 in this area that's shown here. Really, none of which were put in with an evaluation. Geez, are we putting too many of these things in? Are we going to have some impacts on lakes and streams? So this is how much groundwater we pump in the three-county area here. And I mean Waushara, Portage, and Adams here, 78 billion gallons per year. Portage County is number 1 in the state, Waushara number 3, and Adams number 4 in the state for how much water is pumped. If we want to just take a look at what the view is for Waushara County, this is it. So you can see, you know, most of the water that's pumped here does go for irrigation. Some of these other uses, industrial pumping, is locally important. I'll show you an example of that, but the big thing on the landscape is pumping for irrigation water. And it's not like this is the first time since 1959 that people have said we might have a problem here. These are historic reports by the United States Geological Survey, 1965, this one's in 1971, that warned, you know, if we over-ramp this thing, over-ramp the amount of groundwater that we pump, we can have issues here in terms of drying up lakes and streams. But the warnings weren't heeded at the time. So let me go through a few groundwater basics here before we move on and talk about pumping. So groundwater is this water underneath the Earth's surface. It's the water between the individual sand grains or cracks in the rock. And we're able to pump this with wells, and it will flow freely through the subsurface here. Mostly here we're talking about the sand and gravel aquifer that underlies us, typically about 100 feet or so in this part of the state. Now, where does this groundwater come from? It comes from precipitation, of which, you know, a typical year we get about 30 inches or so. So, you know, it starts locally as precipitation. Now, only about an inch or so runs off directly to lakes and streams. The rest of it seeps into the ground here. Once that water seeps into the ground, it's available for plants to take up. And so of that 30 inches that plants take up, just to use some round numbers here, I'm sorry, the 30 inches of precipitation, plants take up and send back into the atmosphere, you know, this arrow, these arrows here, about 20 inches or so, leaving about 10 inches of that water to percolate through and join the other water in the aquifer. And it just doesn't sit still, but it flows from higher places on the landscape where it comes into the system that we call recharge areas, and it flows to lower places in the landscape, streams where it comes out of the ground and enters, streams are the usual discharge point, enters those and leaves the system. Wells are kind of an artificial discharge area here where, you know, for human uses we can take water out of the ground and use it for something else. Lakes are of various types. Now, a lot of lakes that you have in this county are actually not a very common thing in the world. The seepage lake, there's no inlet and no outlet. And typically, you know, groundwater might flow into one side and it flows out the other side. And the groundwater and the lake groundwater level and the lake level are virtually the same. Matter of fact, from a hydrologist point of view, I kind of look at these lakes as they're holes in the water table. So whatever the groundwater level is doing is exactly what the lake level is doing. It's a little more complicated when we have an impoundment or lakes with water coming in and going out, but groundwater is always an important part of the budget. So, you know, if we look at our area here, and we'll just, you know, here's Waushara County here. The whole landscape pretty much is a groundwater recharge area where groundwater is coming in, and then it's trying to get out of the system as easily as it can by flowing to these streams and then leaving the groundwater system here. So, this is why our streams flow year round, is that it's groundwater discharging to them, and so we go through a period without much rainfall or something like these rainfall, but they still flow because the groundwater is feeding them. The lakes in the area here, we can see we have lots of seepage lakes. Again, our expressions of groundwater flowing in one side and then back outside the other. Okay, so why do lakes and stream flows go up and down? Well, let's look at this just from if there's no human drivers here. And we can look at what goes on in groundwater in the aquifer. The aquifer is the geology that contains the groundwater, and it's very much like your checkbook. Like, your checkbook is cash in minus cash out equals your balance here. And this is water in minus water out equals the how much water is sitting here in storage in the aquifer. Okay? The water in is the recharge from precipitation. The water out is the discharge to streams. And the water in storage is the rise and fall of the top of the groundwater level, the water table. And because groundwater is connected to lakes, when groundwater levels are up, maybe due to high precipitation amounts, water levels in the ground and water levels in lakes will also be up. And stream discharge works the same. We have times with more precipitation, we have more discharge to streams. Here's an example. This is some real data, but it doesn't really matter. Let's say that this is a lake, and this is the depth of the lake at the deep spot. And you can see that water levels bounce up and down all the time. You can see that there's some big dips here at certain periods. There's year-to-year highs, year-to-year lows. Typically, we're higher at the end of the spring, at the end of the fall, than we are at the end of winter and the end of summer. So water levels bounce up and down all the time to some degree. And you can see in this example here, if this was a lake, we'd say, well, sometimes it's only 6 feet deep at the deep spot, and then sometimes it's almost 14 feet here. And, we look at this as the fluctuation. Now, what happens when we add pumping into the equation here? Well, we take that, we take our basic equation here, and what we're doing is we're adding a new place where the water is going out. So that means we have to balance this thing somehow. What that means is that we're drawing down the amount that's in storage, so the water table goes down. The other thing is that we are reducing the amount of groundwater discharge to streams that there would be if there was no pumping. This is what groundwater pumping does. And it's all a matter of degree. If you just do a little bit, you're only taking a little bit away. If you're doing a lot, it takes more. There's a couple of little complications in this that we don't have the time to talk about now, but this is the basic way that it works. Okay, so let's add groundwater pumping to here, and let's say that in about 1990 or so, we added some groundwater pumping that drew the water levels down by 2.5 feet. So this time here, we're saying, well, we're going to start pumping here, and it's going to take 2.5 feet of water out of here. Well, then this is how our graph of water level would work here. And notice here that somebody observing here in 2007 would say, gosh, the water levels are way low. Oh, but we've seen the water levels this low before. But they're missing the point here is that the water level really ought to be about this high. So instead of close to a record low, it should be maybe just a little low. Okay? So this is what groundwater pumping does. It reduces the height of the water table, and for lakes that are connected to groundwater, which most of them here are, it also reduces the water levels in those lakes. Now, when I'm talking these water numbers, I'm talking up and down this way, not like feet of beach back and forth. Okay? And so, this is why we're here tonight, as Mike laid it out, that we have a number of these stressed water bodies here, And people ask me this question: is it pumping or is it the weather? This is not to say that I get lots and lots of other suggestions on what it might be. One of these here is my favorite. Where is it? Something about Texas. Oh, here we go. Number 17. Water is being pumped into the deep subsurface for oil production in Texas. And indeed, it's true. They're pumping water down there to get oil out. But, you know, in terms of how much water is on the planet, it doesn't amount to much. But, you know, I take these seriously. I try to, you know, work through them with whoever asks them and look to see if there's something else here. And I'm not seeing it, and neither are my hydrologist colleagues. So if we say, you know, first of all, is it weather? And look at indicators of dry. Here's what I found, first of all. If you look at precipitation for about the last 8-10 years, Hancock has been average or maybe slightly above average, at least through 2008. I got to process 2009 numbers yet. Stevens Point area, slightly below average. The drought index, you know, something that tells us roughly how wet or dry it is, been near normal. If we look at streams in the area where there's not a lot of pumping going on, they tend to be below average, which, you know, the 10 to 50 percentile, but not at record lows, okay? Whereas places where we see a lot of pumping, we do have record lows in streams. Groundwater levels where there's not a lot of pumping are somewhat low, about the 10 to 20 percentile, not at record lows like we see in areas where we are doing a lot of pumping. And the similar thing with lakes here. Lakes where there's not a lot of pumping, and God bless, there's a person that's been taking some water levels on a lake near Wild Rose, and the name escapes me right now, but we've got a few that go back to 1947 over there, and it's a place where there hasn't been a lot of pumping, and you know, we don't see things at record lows like we see some of these other places. Just a couple examples. Here's precipitation. This one would be Hancock, the last 8-10 years here. Here's Stevens Point. 2005 is when Mike was telling you, you know, we saw a lot of bad things happening. The Little Plover dried up. A lot of these lakes started going dry. But when you compare it to a lot of these other periods, gosh, you know, it hasn't been dry at all. The 1959 around here, where is it? That's 49, 59-ish is here. You can see it more clearly on the Hancock one. 50s must have been hellacious around here. Dry. 40s too. Maybe even worse than the 30s perhaps. I don't know. I'd like to get some accounts of that. But we're not nearly like that now. Here's the drought index, and again, here's 2000 to 2010 on the bottom. You know, we're not sitting too bad. Some years a little dry, some years a little above average, but compared to, you know, a lot of these periods in the past, we're not seeing that we have something special now that can explain these things that we're seeing in our lakes and streams. So in answer to is it pumping or weather, I'd say, well, it's a little to middling dry, but not a drought as classified by NOAA or another kind of organization. So this begs the question then, is there missing water? And missing water is water that we can't account for by just weather alone. And here's where I'm not going to present all the science. As a scientist, we always want to get this stuff out to be intellectually honest with people, but those people glaze over anyway, so this is kind of where you're going to have to take my word for it a little bit. And we use two approaches here. One is measurements, where we have actual measurements of stream flows or lake levels, and another one is calculations, how we think something works. Some people are particular about these, so I'm just going to label when I'm doing measurements, when I'm doing calculations here. So Little Plover River, this was one that the USGS studied in 1965 and, you know, talked about how pumping could impact it. And here's the Little Plover when it first dried up in 2005. You can see the Little Plover, a dandy little stream, outstanding resource water. They made a movie about this river and about groundwater pumping in 1963. Many, many high-capacity wells around here. And this is a little unusual. This one has industrial and municipal wells around here, too. Our analyses, this is a long-term USGS gauge that's fortunately there. And which makes it a good study site. That's why I'm bringing it into here in Waushara County, and was sitting there from 1959 to 1987. And that's the stretch of the Little Plover that dries up. So here's what we found. From 1959 to 1987, the Little Plover, when the USGS was measuring it, was flowing at 10 to 11 cubic feet per second. And a cubic foot's about 7.5 gallons. And it had a minimum of only 3.9 cubic feet per second for one day during that whole period. If you look at from 2005 to 2010, the Little Plover flow has been averaging only 4.5 cubic feet per second and has gotten down to a minimum of 1.7. So clearly, you don't need a PhD in hydrology to say something doesn't look right here when we get this much of a decline in numbers. Through various approaches, a colleague and I have figured the pumping takeaways amount to this much, about 3.2 to 5.4 cubic feet per second. So you can imagine if the average is 10 and maybe it's been a little dry, so the water might be flowing down at 7 or 8, and then you take 3 to 5 more away from it. Wow, that really does put a dent in something, and we see substantial effects in this little stream. Just a map, and now these are things we calculated that we weren't able to do from actual measurements because they don't exist. But this is the percentage of missing groundwater discharge in area streams. And the ones that we're most concerned about are black, because that means it's 10% or more. And this is what it looks like in the headwaters. When we get in the very most headwaters of these streams, say the upper mile, our calculations show that maybe as much as half the flow is missing from those streams. The groundwater discharge to that stream is missing. The X's on here are the high-capacity wells, by the way. We asked the same question about missing water for groundwater and lakes then, and this was something else that was predicted by the United States Geological Survey 1971 report for the area, very coincidentally, right around Long Lake here. They said that when pumping reached a certain level, expect to see that on top of natural water level declines 3 to 5 feet more. And just orient you a little bit. Again, here's Waushara County. And fortunately, I don't know if it's your county conservation department or your county zoning, but they're very good about getting water levels in these lakes. And between them and the DNR, we have a very good record of lakes in this county that we're able to use. The lakes are all in white. Place where there's long-term United States Geological Survey wells are in the kind of pinkish color, and the green ones are places that we use as reference sites to help us figure out what is the weather and what is the pumping pile-on for that. And here's what we found here. Notice first of all along here, we're finding very little missing water. In fact, statistically, not significant right now. And in fact, a few of these were saying, well, you can make an argument that they've even come up a little bit compared to our reference site here. If you notice here, then, as Mike was saying, these ones in the western part of the county here, some of them that we're saying very conservatively, maybe missing 3 to 3.6 feet of water. We did these numbers very conservatively to not overblow the amount of water that's missing and leave ourselves open for criticism about that. Interesting, I did a program on Pleasant Lake a couple, 3 years ago. I said, I don't think there's going to be a hit here, but our calculations show they're missing about 1.5 feet of water there. Here's what our calculations show. And because we don't have water levels everywhere, this is a good way to do it. Some people, this is called computer modeling it's another approach. But these colors tell you how much water is missing. Black means that it's over 4 feet. The red is 3 to 4 feet. And the kind of orange, 2 to 3, yellow, 1 to 2. And, you know, our Long Lake, Huron Lake are in this red band here. Wolf Lake, Pickerel Lake, and Portage County are in the red here too. So this does actually a pretty good job of explaining. I'll show you. Here I just put them both together. Does a good job of explaining how much water is missing from these water bodies. So, you know, if this was high water levels, you know, we had a bunch of wet years, you might not miss this 3 feet or 4 feet of water. But when we're in this slightly dry spell, you know, not a drought again, and we're piling on with it with pumping, now we really do have some problems. A couple of things I'll say, and then I'll let you get on the rest of your meeting. First of all, people are really quick to want to, and God bless everybody who wants to do it. You know, people like to think about, well, what about this solution? What about that solution? And rattle off a whole bunch of things. But these things we've done the analysis for them. They won't help. You know, stop irrigating the roads. It makes people mad to see irrigation water on the road, but it's you know, compared to what's on the rest of the field, it just doesn't amount to much. No irrigating during rainstorms. Well, when we over irrigate, that water seeps through the soil and goes back into the ground. So, you know, yeah, maybe it's a waste of energy or something like that. Maybe the grower just needed to do it, but it's not going to put water back in the aquifer or back in the lakes. Same with low pressure versus high pressure irrigation. You know, the plants are using that water, sending it back into the atmosphere. It really doesn't matter how you get onto it. Drip irrigation wouldn't make a difference. Only irrigating at night isn't either. Growers talk about irrigation scheduling, which is a good thing, but does not help us conserve water. This was in the Argus article the other day. Some growers saying, hey, we got these new nozzles on sprinklers that eliminate some of the evaporation that takes place, and these guys spent a lot of money for installing low pressure sprinklers and some computer stuff to prevent overwatering. This is very, very good stuff. It conserves huge amounts of energy, okay, electricity to bring that water and put it on the field. Unfortunately, it doesn't conserve water. You know, if you put too much water on the fields, it's going to end up back into the ground is how it works. So some conclusions here. Dry weather is not that unusual. Water is missing, and tweaks won't provide an answer. 2 more of these, and let you go. Where do we go from here? So we got a balance. One side, we have do nothing. You continue along where we're going, and we have increased irrigation. I don't mean just here. A lot of other places in the state as well. St. Croix, Dunn County, other places. And we're going to have more stressed water more of the time. You know, this is inevitable. It's like a law of gravity. Or, you know, here's the other extreme. You know, we can totally ban pumping, but, you know, the farm-based economy obviously would suffer severely. There is some in-betweens here. There is some in-betweens that rational people could sit down and talk about. You know, there will be productive agriculture. You can't have productive agriculture here in healthy water bodies. It'll take some doing, though. I have been encouraged lately by a couple of things I've seen lately. This one by a potato grower, Justin Isherwood, who was calling on agriculture, hey, let's draft we should be in front of this thing. You know, we care about the land. Let's get in front of it instead of fight this thing. I was also happy to see this quote here, the potato and vegetable growers acknowledge an effort that I spent 2 or 3 years with them on, and we actually came up with draft legislation that was very mature. It was very, very good stuff. They didn't go all the way to the altar with the River Alliance with this, unfortunately, back in the day, but it's still there. And, you know, I'm seeing an indication maybe they want to build on this effort and move along. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board members, for your time.
Thank you very much. Mark, you want to get the lights? Okay, now Ken Williams and Patrick Murray are going to have some comments for this presentation.
Ken and I wanted to provide you with a little bit additional information, and we handed it out to you before the meeting. One of them is some information on Fawcett's local weed. That's this one with the plant on the front of it. Fawcett's local weed is a endangered species that we have in the area that we've been talking about, and it is about a 10,000-year-old plant that relies on the extreme fluctuations of the lakes in that area. So the lakes have been fluctuating in that area for a long time. But if the lakes disappear, the plant probably would too. The other thing that I provided you with was so it has a picture on the top of it. Is that between 2004 and 2009, the properties that are on those lakes that you see on the picture have decreased in value about 4% in the fair market value, whereas overall the town of Oasis assessed fair market value has increased by 11.6%. So if you there's probably something going on in that area that would account for that decrease in value, and that could be because those lakes don't have as much water in them as they used to. Versus Lake Huron, which increased by 19.1% in that same 5-year period, and that's a 7.5% more than the town of Oasis. So the lake there, it's probably an influence as to why those properties have increased in greater value than the others. And then the third thing that I provided you with has some colored maps on the back of it. And from that I tried to, based on the study that George had just presented you with, he estimated that in the Plainfield and Hancock area that the lakes had lost 3.6% or 3.6 feet of water. And I tried to show you, based on what the current lake levels are as of 2009, what those lakes would look like if the irrigation was to cease completely, and what kind of an impact that would have on recreational opportunities in that area. The recreational opportunities for Huron Lake probably wouldn't change drastically, but there would be more area for canoeing and swimming and Plainfield Lake and Long Lake. So is there any questions on what I have for you? And Ken has some additional comments.
Good evening. Yeah, I handed out, I just copied off some, pulled off some data from the first page on top was one of the things Patrick and I had talked about, or what was growing. You go back 50 years ago before irrigation, what was agriculture in the county. I've got a book, 1945 Waushara County Ag Report from Wisconsin Crop and Livestock Reporting Service in my office from back in 1945, and it shows at that point in time harvested cropland of 135,000 acres, idle cropland of 22,000, pasture which was plowed within 7 years was listed at 37,000, woodland pasture at 39,000, other pasture at 30,000, woodland not pasture at 32,000, and then all other land was listed at 39,000. So I guess it would appear to me that we probably had a lot of land that was either in pasture or, with cattle on it, or basically wasn't utilized for crop production at all. Data from our 2007 Census of Agriculture. Total land and farms for our county was listed. We had 677 farms for 148,000 acres. It listed 603 farms with 108,000 or 900 acres of total cropland. Of that, total harvested cropland was 97,700 acres. Irrigated cropland was 35,560 acres. Then I pulled off some of the value for agricultural products sold. Total value in the 2007 Census of Agriculture for Waushara County was $97,476,000. Of that, The crops total was 72,510,000. In that, we've got grains, oil seeds, dry beans, dry peas, 14 million, corn, 11 million, soybeans, 2.5 million. Vegetables and potatoes was $50,718,000. Nursery at $1.8 million, Christmas trees at $3.5 million, and other crops and hay was listed at $1.5 million. And then livestock, poultry, and products totaled $24,966,000. Cattle and calves was a large one there, $4 million. Milk and cow products was $18,800,000. And then we've got the small ones, sheep and goats, horses and mules, and ponies. And then I also pulled off, agriculture is a large employer in the county. The Census of Agriculture lists 150 farms, having 1,459 workers, for a total payroll of $16,179,000. So it's a big payroll from agriculture. And then I think I'll simply go and close on the second page. Land use for vegetables in 2007, it lists 50 farms total. Of those, 33 are irrigated. It listed 26,284 acres total land use for vegetables, of which 22,605 was irrigated acres. And that it shows is changing from 2002, where they had 28,800 acres total in vegetables, and of that, at that point in time, they had 28,000 acres irrigated. So, any questions on some of those numbers?
Questions for Ken? Very good presentations tonight. Now we're going to continue on with discussion of possible action items, and the first one will be adjustment to the coroner's compensation package, which we missed some of it at our last time, but we need it this time before the election, so if somebody wants to run for coroner, they know what to. Yep. Donna?
I make a motion we approve that package.
Second. Second by Kirschner. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, all in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Has been approved. Now we've got approval of letters of agreement between Washington County, Human Service and Courthouse Employees Union, and Highway Employees Union. And Deb, you want to comment on it?
Sure. I did put some updated copies by your places, so make sure you're looking at the right one. The changes basically from the ones that were set in the packet is what was approved by the union last night, and it's just some clarification things. Instead of 30 days to turn their requests in for reimbursement, they have 60 days. And then there was a clarification on what happens from January, February, and March, that they have 30 days from the date of signing to get their reimbursement requests in. So the basic issue here is that when we were faced with a 29% increase in our health insurance premiums for 2010, we had to make a tough choice, and so we, instead of staying with Group Health Trust, we switched over to Network Health Plan. And we were mid-contract with AFSCME, and there were some drug changes that were in the network plan, and because we were mid-contract, it was something that we needed to deal with the unions on. And so this is something that I think is workable. The unions did accept it. It's giving them something for the change. They get a third year on their contract. The 2.5% that we would give them in 2011 is similar to what the WPPA group got on their contracts for these health insurance changes. So they are accepting the network health plan, and we are going to reimburse them for their co-pays, their drug co-pays, just for 2010. And then in 2011, it will just be the insurance as is.
Okay, we need a motion.
I got a question yet. I guess it probably doesn't make any difference here, but could you explain number 4 to me?
Number 4 basically states that we won't furlough or lay off any current AFSCME employee in 2010. So for the remainder of the year, we are guaranteeing that we will not lay off any of our current positions or ask for a day of furlough.
And this will be just for 2010?
This is just for 2010.
Doesn't roll over to 11?
It does not roll over.
So what does number 5, when it states that the existing agreement exists through?
The collective bargaining agreement was for 2009 and 2010. This will change that collective bargaining agreement and add 1 year to that contract. So all other language will stay the same in the collective bargaining agreement, not this. This isn't the collective bargaining agreement. So it's the contract itself. And it will just add 1 year to that, and it will add 2.5% to their salary schedule. So the language in number 4 will end as of December of 2010.
Any more questions? Dennis?
Chairman, I would make a motion to approve both of the letters of agreement.
County, you second it? Okay, any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's been approved. Now we've got approval of civil rights compliance and affirmative action plan, and Deb, you got it on the.
All right, I do. Basically what this whole plan has been changing. About every 2 years you have to update your civil rights compliance plan. The last time it was for 3 years. This current time it will be for 4 years, so that the whole system is somewhat changing. So this one actually starts in 2010 and it would go through the end of 2013. And the good news is it's for 4 years. The bad news was it was due January 1st, and I got the email on it on April 9th of this year. So it was kind of a mad scramble to get everything done, and basically you analyze all your programs, and you want to make sure that your service area and the demographics for your service area are somewhat similar to the demographics of who you're actually serving. And so we have over 30 programs that we are that would fall under this plan. Most of them are with Human Services. So you have the Health Department, Human Services, Child Support that fall under this plan, Department of Aging. And so there was a lot of analysis that was done in a very short period of time, and I thank the departments for getting me the information as fast as they could. So basically this plan is an assurance to the federal government that we are going to abide by all the civil rights laws, and there are over 30 laws that are out there. These are the main protected areas that we would deal with in all of our programs. So you have age, race, color, national origin, disability, gender, religion. When you get into the employment areas, it's a little bit different. Then you have you would have sex and disabilities and conviction records. There's just some other ones that fall under that when it comes to employment: sexual orientation, marital status, ancestry. But these are the main ones that we deal with when we're dealing with our services. There's two different ways that you can actually get into discrimination issues. The first one is employment. So Waushara County is an employer. We have over 450 people that work for us. And so you have to make sure that as you're hiring, as you're making employment decisions, that you're not using any of the criteria that you're discriminating in any ways. The service delivery is all the programs that we provide to our consumers and our citizens. And so again, you have to make sure that you're providing those services equally. Affirmative action is also part of this plan, and basic affirmative action means that you're looking at your programs, you're looking at your employment, and you're making sure that if there are some things that look like it's a discrimination scenario, you take positive steps to end that. You make sure that your policies are such that nothing, this doesn't reoccur, or you're creating new opportunities for people that are in protective classes. Affirmative action did change back in 1995. I think all of you have heard that there was always kind of an underlying feeling that affirmative action had quotas, and that unqualified people were getting jobs just because they fell into protective classes. So in 1995, President Clinton did issue some orders that, you know, if affirmative action does not create a quota, and it does not give preference to unqualified individuals, it does not reverse discrimination. Basically, your affirmative action programs are to make sure that the playing fields are level. It still is qualified individuals. So the first step is you look at your most current census information. Well, the census last was done in 2000, so that data is pretty old now. And so when you look at the census information that is available to us right now, it's mostly estimates. So in the 2008 estimate is that our population is at 26,468 people. 47.4% is female, 4.6% is disabled, and 7.3% is minority. So when you look at, you need to compare this information with what is actually going on in your employment. So we have 450 employees. So basically you look at that and you see if out of our employees is about half female, do we have about 4.6 that are considered disabled, and do we have about 7.3% minority? So that's your target. They break it down even further by category. So you have professional, you have officials, you have your clerical, technicians, service workers, and laborers. And you want to look at each one of those categories and see if it somewhat mirrors that. If you find that you're way off base, then affirmative action kicks in, and you have to take some steps to try to correct that. So perhaps if you don't have a good representative of the minority group, then maybe the affirmative action would be to advertise at a place that reaches out to minorities and encourage them to apply for jobs. Now again, you still go with the qualified people, but you're trying to get a better selection of people that would fall into one of these groups to try to get them to apply, and hopefully, you know, that you just get a better sampling of who you're hiring. The categories that we check are that the state is asking us to check as white, not of Hispanic origin. And then if you go down, you'll see where it says Hispanic, Latino, regardless of race. That's always confusing to people because the Hispanic is white. That is a white race. The Hispanic is an ethnic group. And so sometimes people get kind of confused by that, or they don't really understand why it's stated that way. But the Hispanic ethnic group is such a large group that they have them in their own category. Then all the rest of them listed there are races. And so basically civil rights is all about equal access, and it's regardless of age, regardless of race or gender, color or national origin or religion. And I guess, you know, what we say to people is just treat people like you want to be treated, and you'll be pretty safe. So anyway, that is your Civil Rights Compliance 101, and I thank you. And so basically the plan is just to assure that we're following all the rules. That's it.
Okay. Any questions on it? Otherwise, we need a motion. Motion by Everett to approve.
Approve.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion? Second by Mrs. Prince. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's been approved. Now we have consideration and possible action on the following resolution and ordinances.
We got Resolution 17-5 of 10. It's a resolution acknowledging the commendable service of Bob Maloney as the Waushara County Supervisor.
Mr. Downey.
That motion.
Okay. And by Larry, we got a second. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been approved.
Resolution 18-5 of 10, it's the final 2009 budget addendums. They have no impact on the levy, but they're the final ones for the audit. Motion? Motion by,
Budget as amended.
motion by Mrs. Krantz,
I'll second.
seconded by Donna Colada. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been approved.
Resolution 19-5 of 10, it's a resolution regarding fees for services provided by the coroner.
This is something we added.
I'll
Donna?
make a motion that we approve that.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Everett. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been approved. The next three now are roll call votes on them, so when we get going, it's roll call vote.
Yeah, the resolution 25 of 10 is the resolution authorizing the conversion of a full-time behavioral health counselor position to a 90% full-time work schedule.
Chairman, I would move to approve Resolution 25-10.
I'll second that.
Second by Mike Likeness. Is there any explanation? Otherwise, Glenn here will explain it to us if you
Glenn, maybe say a few words about it?
want to explain it, Glenn, so everybody knows what.
Evening. That resolution speaks to a therapist position we have in our clinical unit. Over the last year and a half or 2 years, we've been able to analyze the data and information that suggests that position, summer months, it seems to slow down some. So given horizon ahead and the challenges we do feel we're going to face, it's part of the ongoing mission of looking at ways we can cut some services or deal with revenue issues. We looked at this, and we still can perform all of the mandated and required services in that position role, going from 100% full-time to 90%. So we save about 10% of that position, still perform the duties.
Okay, any questions? If not, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
And tonight, we start our roll calls with Mr. Piaski,
Yes.
Mr. Weddy,
Yes.
Mr. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Eckstein,
Yes.
Mr. Plata,
Yes,
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Likeness,
Yes.
Mr. Crawford,
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner,
Yes.
Mrs. Krantz,
Yes.
Mr. Tippett.
Yes.
Passes. Next, we have Resolution 21-5 of 10, resolution authorizing 10 additional hours per week for a child support specialist position.
Okay, we have a motion. No, not yet. Mr. Downey,
We authorize 10 additional hours per week.
I'll second the motion.
second by Dennis Weddy. Okay, Glenn, you want to,
Well, I think Debbie's out there for this.
Debbie?
I'll make this very short. A couple years ago, I was actually able to take a position and make it from full-time to part-time. We had a lot of federal funding cuts, and so we were able to do it. Because of the slump in the economy, life in the child support office is quite busy right now. What I'm asking for is to make that part-time position go to 75%. It would mean adding about 10 hours a week. I will be able to totally fund it with special federal funding that is out there until the end of September, which makes no sense, but I will be able to take advantage of it. So the additional hours will be paid for the next 4 months if this were to be approved to go in and be effective in June. After that, the federal funding is gone. So there's federal funding cuts, and now there's special federal funding that would pay for this for the time being, but then that would be gone. I do feel as if I really do need that additional 10 hours every week. Are there any questions?
We would anticipate that it would increase Debbie's budget in the salary and benefits area by about $2,300 for 2010, and it will probably be about $10,000 for 2011.
Any more questions or discussion? Motion is second on the floor. Go with the vote.
Okay, and this roll call vote starts with Mr. Weddy,
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Eckstein,
Yes.
Mr. Plata,
yes,
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Likeness,
Yes.
Mr. Crawford,
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner,
Yes.
Mrs. Krantz, Mr. Tippett,
Yes.
Mr.
Yasti.
Yes.
All passed. Then we have Resolution 22-510. It's a resolution authorizing the creation of a full-time treatment foster care specialist position in the Department of Human Services.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Lakeness to approve. Do I have a second? Second by Everett Eckstein. Now we'll have a discussion on it, or explanation of it from Glenn again.
Thank you.
Larry, you need one? Everybody have one? Okay. As some of you are reviewing this, I thought this was the easiest way and the quickest way to explain the challenge we're faced with. Most of you know our department forever is changing constantly due to a lot of unknowns. This last year, we've been aware of a young person who was the responsibility of the state of Wisconsin because of a broken adoption. And for years, for 2 years, they were responsible for all cares. This particular person remains and continues to be served in residential care in a town away from here. Because it was a broken adoption, the state was responsible for the 2 years. They were not able to get that young person adopted again. So it falls back to the county because this is the county of origin where that took place. Now, given the economic times we're in, it's almost to some degree somewhat insane to come to you and say, we're asking for a new position. But as this spells out, and let me explain real quick the rationale for that. If we don't do something, you'd see the cost currently for this person runs well over $100,000 a year. We really should not leave this person in residential care because this person's been there for 2 years already. So our alternative is if we look at treatment foster care, and given the age of the person, we're going to be with this person for a good 10 years, 8 to 10 years. If we go treatment foster care, you're going to count on about $80,000 a year. So for the last many months, we've been looking at how are we going to deal with this added cost, of which we have no control and no choice in the matter. How is the county, how are we going to deal with this? We reached out to some of our most experienced foster homes and pleaded with one of them, dealt with many difficult kids, and they have graciously agreed to take this person on. We can't just put a person with the extreme difficulties this young person presents based on their past in a treatment foster care home and then just say thanks a lot, because the exposure is too great. So our way of dealing with it, instead of paying another outside agency those big dollars, if we bring it in-house and do it ourselves, we add this position not only to deal with this young person, but a handful of others that we're faced with that are going to present similar scenarios. We potentially can cover about 75% of the cost of that new position by the simple work that they do every day through revenue we can charge. And I think I used the figure of everything but about $15,000. If we don't do this, we just have to accept we will have, this is just one exposure, that will cost us $80,000 to $100,000 a year for the next 8 to 10 years. If we implement this plan with a new position, potentially we can cut that dramatically lower. As I sit here tonight before you, it sounds good in theory. I can't give you any guarantees because we're dealing with human behavior. But I can tell you with some sense of confidence that I believe that we can bring this young person back. I believe it will not be easy, but I do believe we can turn the corner. It still will cost us some money, but we'll be able to pay for part of it through revenue, but it will not be the high cost. So that's really the story. coming to you as a board if we thought there was an alternative that was economically more sound. So we're trying to be good stewards of the limited funding, but if we don't do this, it's potentially going to cost us money. And that position would not be isolated to that one individual, it would work with other kids, similar exposures and backgrounds. So, any questions? Is it clear?
What happens if it doesn't work?
Well, I'd love to say that's not an option, but realistically, if it doesn't work, we would be faced with, as I put in here, as with any kid or adult we deal with in this county that we're responsible for, that potential always is there. The person would have to go to a more structured setting temporarily that would cost significant dollars. As we deal with every day with kids right now, we have another kid in one of the institutes that costs $900 a day. We won't be able to get that person out, but we deal with that dilemma every single day of the week. So if it doesn't work out, we would get back together, we'd have to put that person in a safe environment, and then look at why is it not working. But we have spent months in planning services and support around this whole plan with a lot of confidence it'll work, but it's going to be a tough road. But honestly, as you had appropriate question, if it doesn't, we have plan B, and that's to get together and go at it from a different angle, and that's the best I can answer.
Would we still have to keep this person on?
I guess, Larry, one of the suggestions I would make is that if you have concerns about that, you could always put a clause in this, amend this resolution that if it doesn't work, that position would sunset.
But let me clarify though, keep in mind, although we're able to give you a reason, what drove this was this one person, but keep in mind, even with that kind of a restriction, we have other kids that present the same exposures that are waiting in the wings. So if we said this doesn't work and we get rid of the position, we aren't eliminating those other kids. Those exposures are going to be with us for many years to come. I think my response to that is if we reach the point where that position is not producing what it is we need to do and is not able to address the other exposures, I'm willing to say that based on our leadership to this point over the years, I would be the first one to come and say, let's get rid of the position. We have no desire to add a position for any reason to say we add it because we want it. This is purely a business decision that if we don't do it, it's going to cost us a lot of money. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Would you propose that in next year that this would be about a $15,000 expense to our budget? Over and above what you said you could recoup?
We can raise revenue in that position all of close to, that's approximate. You know, part of it is whoever you hire, they're going to have a single policy insurance or a family. We priced it out high end in approximately $15,000. That is about what we're anticipating.
So we're not going to have to look at funding that position wholly through your budget next year?
Totally?
I mean, without any money coming back in, like you said, from collecting
Well, the revenue will
percentages.
pay for,
Will always be there.
the 75% or 80%, the other
Okay.
15 would come out of our budget.
Right, right.
But when you offset that 15 to the 8,000, it's pretty easy to determine it's a good investment. Contingent on, yes, if the plan works. But we can't guarantee that. It very well could go south, but we deal with the same dilemma every day with many people we work with.
If this, in other words, if this does not work, we're looking at something like $900 a day for care for individuals like that. It could be more than one.
That's correct.
And we're looking at, that's, could be like in Winnebago or Mendola or a facility such as that.
That's correct.
And we're looking at trying to sidestep that type of an expense here.
Which goes along with, you all approved years ago, we have the 4 mentors, and we can show statistically what impact that has made on kids in this county we're not having to send as many kids away for care, so that investment has proved itself time in and time out. This fits the same mindset in theory, that's the purpose of proposing this. Everett.
Sheriff Peterson attended our town board meeting last night, and he was telling that more and more things are going on, especially with kids, as far as problems and having to take care of them and take them in, and mentioning no names, of course, but kids as young as 12 years old that never seem to have these kind of problems before. So whether it's the economy or what's going on, you know, he isn't sure himself, but he just let us know that these things are happening, and so I, for one,
fair representation.
yeah,
I think Ruth can speak.
you're getting the second hand now, but
Right, but it is true, our mental health referrals for even younger people, our child protective service cases have risen again, and again, we have a sense it's because of the economy and stressors and all, but the mental health, and those are your high-cost placements. Other questions?
Could this position take care of 5 new ones plus this old one?
There again, I think that's a good question, but to sit here and say to this board and to you that, oh, sure, they can handle 5. Because of the difficulty of care this position's going to deal with, I'm not sure we're willing to say they could take care of 5. I think it's safe to say they would take care of more than 1 or 2 kids. If it were to be approved, it would be our intent to maximize that resource. But to say they can take 5 or 6 kids, there again, then you defeat your purpose if you're stretching them out too far, because we're talking about this one person coming back, literally. I could see this person spending 20 hours a week just with that one family. And that's gonna be evening hours and weekend. It's not gonna be Monday through, not our 8 to 5, it's gonna be evenings and weekends. So whoever chooses to do it, they're not gonna have the usual 8 to 5 job. It's gonna be weekend hours. And that's the only way to spend the money appropriately for the exposure that we're gonna be dealing with. It can't be a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. Other questions?
Questions, go for a roll call vote.
Okay, and we start with Mr. Dowdy.
Definitely yes.
Mr. Eckstein.
yes.
Mrs. Plata.
Yes.
Mr. Weiss.
Yes.
Mr. Likeness.
Yes.
Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
Kirschner.
Yes.
Mr. Spence. Mr. Tim.
Yes.
Mr. Yosky.
Yes.
Mr. Leddy.
Yes.
Thank you.
We go to ordinance number 523, and I believe Mr. Kirschner is abstaining from this. Ordinance amending Waushara County zoning maps pursuant to the authority granted in Chapter 58 of the County Code. It's a zone change for the town of Coloma.
Mr. Piaski,
I'll make a motion to approve.
Likeness, second it. Any discussion needed on this?
I have a question. There is presently a structure there that will be gone? And this is where Mr. Fight was talking about the park going to be? This is on the, is that it? Okay. Great.
Mark, did you have any comments about this one at all?
Had a public hearing on it, so I suppose a lot of questions were answered at that time. Anything else? We got a motion, we got a second. Mr. Kirschner abstains. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's been approved.
We have ordinance number 524, an ordinance amending Waushara County zoning maps pursuant to the authority granted in Chapter 58 of the County Code. It's a zone change for the town of Wacoma.
Motion by Mr. Kirschner, second by Larry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been approved. Now we've got a proclamation of the designating week of May 16th to 22nd, 2010 as Emergency Medical Service Week.
I make a motion, we approve that.
Donna Clada, second by Mr. Kirschner. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been approved. Any board suggestion for future agenda items?
This is just for everybody's information. On May 22nd, I believe it's a Saturday, from 10 till 4, there'll be an open house at the new Wild Rose Fire Station. And everybody is welcome to go and see what we've done.
What's the date of that again?
May 22nd.
Yep.
I bring this up with much trepidation because I still remember what happened last year when we talked about this. Next month at the June meeting, we really need to start talking about the 2011 budget. And so I would like you to think about it, think about what we did for 2010 and if that was successful or not. And we need to talk about it because we really need to set some guidelines for departments because they are going to start putting their budget requests together in end of June, beginning of July. So I need you to think about it, and it'll have to be on the agenda next month.
Good idea. And do we want to go to a couple other places again this year for our county board meetings?
I would like to see that happen.
Bring it up.
Any offers? Anybody want to host it?
I think the town of Deerfield might. Let me check. I have a meeting with Mr. Whaley on Thursday night.
Oisipi, want to do something? Something on the west end?
Town of Coloma probably would at the community center.
Sure.
Got it.
Move to adjourn.
Then move to adjourn. Do we have a second? Second by Will Downey. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.